Hi guys, it's Allegra. I am going to be teaching you guys how to make a decorative fishbowl today. So what we're going to need to start is a slab of clay, a needle tool, it's got this pointy end here, a scoring tool, anything that has little scrapey edges, a paintbrush, a little dish of water. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the clay, and to do this, we're going to start by just sketching out the shape of a little fishbowl. Had a little mistake there, I'm just gonna rub it out. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and use my needle tool to cut through my lines. And what I'm doing is I'm pushing my needle all the way to the point where I can almost feel the table and it's cutting the clay. Whereas before, I was just simply lightly drawing on the surface. Went a little over my line, so I just went back and corrected my line. Now I've cut out the shape of my fish tank or fishbowl. I've got this extra clay. We're gonna come back to this later. But first what we're going to do is we're gonna look at our little fishbowl and we're gonna refine the shape a bit. So I noticed that this side has more of a flat edge and this one's more round. So I'm actually going to come in and just remove a little more clay here to give it more of a round shape. And mind you, you can do any shape you'd like. You can make it a square, a circle, whatever you'd like. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my needle tool and I'm going to decide how I'd like to decorate my little fishbowl. So, you know, in fishbowls, sometimes there's little pebbles down here at the bottom. So I'm just gonna add a little area and I'll add texture to that later, but this is just my sketch as to what I'm gonna be doing where. And sometimes in little fish bowls, they have coral or seaweed. So I'm just gonna draw some little bits of seaweed. And of course, in a fishbowl, you have a fish. So I'll start with doing a cute little guy that looks almost like a goldfish cracker. Maybe add a little fin. Some bubbles. Well, this is where the water will end. And this is where the glass will be. Bloop. I think I'm gonna add the pebbles up to there. So this will be textured. So I'll just add lines so that we know we're gonna add texture there. Maybe some little water lines. So now what I'm going to do with this excess clay I have here is I'm going to look at the little bits I've made, and I'm actually going to start sculpting them out of these little pieces of clay. So since I said I wanted to add texture here, what I'm thinking is almost like a pebble look that I'm going for. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this piece of clay and I'm going to just shape it into little balls. Just do a bunch of them. Doesn't have to be symmetrical. They can all be different shapes and sizes. So I've made a few, and what I'm going to do to adhere these to our little makeshift fishbowl is I'm going to slip and score. For those of you that have never done ceramics before, slipping and scoring is a technique that is used to, in a way, glue the pieces of clay together. It's as if you were to put two pieces of paper together without the glue. What would happen? They'd fall apart. If you do not slip and score in ceramics, what will happen is you'll place your pieces where you want, but they will just fall off. So what we're going to do is we're going to slip and score to stick these little pebbles onto the fishbowl. So I'm using my scoring tool. I don't know if you guys can see that too well. It's got this, it almost looks like a rake. What I'm going to do is, since this is the area where I'm going to be adding my pebbles, I'm going to just score that up. And you don't have to be gentle. I know a lot of times students are often afraid to push into the clay, but the clay is a very forgiving medium. And you can always erase whatever extra lines you've got and you didn't want. So this is where I'm going to be sticking my pebbles. So I just scratched up the whole surface. And then the slipping part is where you add water to get almost a gooey surface. You have to slip and score on both pieces that you're sticking together. So for example, I already scored here. I want to attach this little ball, so I'm going to take each individual ball and add these little rough lines to it. This is called scoring. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add a little water. This is where, oops, I grab my paintbrush and I just lightly get it wet. I don't get it sopping wet, and I'm just going to lightly dab some water over the lines that I've already scored on this. And so now that I've done that, this area is now pretty wet, and I'm gonna just lightly score over it again. And I don't know if you guys can see now, we've created what's called slip, this gooey stuff here. This is going to help the pieces of clay adhere to each other. So we've got this. I've already scored this. This is already scored. So then I'm just going to decide where I want to place this. I think I'm going to add it here and just start with the outline. I'm just going to do this for every little ball I've got. They get away from you sometimes. Okay, so now we're just gonna take these little extras and bunch them back up. We'll be able to use them again. So this is my, just kind of reshaping it a little. This is the texture I added to the bottom of my fish tank, or fish bowl. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the seaweed. I want to make it three-dimensional. So I'm going to take some more scrap clay, which I've got a ton here. And I'm going to cut a piece off with my scoring tool, or with my needle tool. So I'm just gonna use a piece about this big. Don't need that much clay, but that's what I'm gonna cut it with. And I don't know if you guys can see, but the seaweed here are just some fine little lines that I made squiggly. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually gonna cut this piece of clay right here pretty thin, because it's got about the width I want for my seaweed. So I'm just gonna cut this off in a very thin slice. So it's pretty thin. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to use my fingers to pinch it into the shape and movement I want the clay to have. So here's my little first makeshift piece of aquarium seaweed. I just shaped it into what I had drawn on my little fishbowl, and I'm actually going to do the same technique I did to adhere these little balls. I'm going to score the back of this and score here. So I'm just going to do this more precisely than I did on the bottom half so that we don't end up with a bunch of scoring lines outside of the area we're using. But if you do get that, that's okay. I will show you how to remove those lines. So I'm just going to score the back of the little seaweed leaf I made. I'm gonna get my paintbrush again, just lightly wet this. Scratch it up, gets all gooey, and now I'm gonna attach my seaweed. One down, 2 more to go. It goes pretty quickly. So what I'm doing is I'm just taking my brush in between these pieces to just remove any excess slip or lines that I feel are out of place. I'm just cleaning up my area. And then to refine it a bit, I'm going to just take my fingers in there and pinch the edges a little more to make it look a little nicer. Go over it with my finger. Now we're gonna make our fish 3-dimensional. And the way I'm going to do that is the same way I've been showing you guys before with all the other pieces. So I've got this extra little piece here, just so happened to be a pretty good size. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use a rolling pin. You can use a pencil, you can use your paintbrush. I'm just gonna roll this thinner, showing you with the little brush, but I'm gonna do it with the rolling pin because it works faster. So I smashed my piece of clay. You can also do this with the palm of your hand. Just try to apply pressure evenly and you'll end up with a flat piece of clay. So what I'm going to do, I'm just cleaning off my needle tool, I'm going to draw the same shape of a little fishy that I have there, which is like the goldfish snack cracker. So I sketched it, now I'm gonna cut it out. Just clean up the lines a little bit because it's a little messy. Now I'm gonna attach it here. See, it's about the same size. So I'm going to score where I'd like to attach, score what I'd like to attach. I'm using my brush again to get a little water in here. And when you're doing this in front of you, you can actually see this water spread along the lines that you've created. It's pretty cool. So now I've created my slip. Now I'm going to stick my little 3-dimensional popped out fish on there. And so now that I've got my little fish on there, I haven't quite added the little fin that I wanted to yet, but I'm actually going to do his little face, and I think it's cute. I'll just do a little smile and a little eye. So we've added that detail. And then for the seaweed, I think I'm just gonna add some little lines in here to make it add dimension to it. Okay, so I've done that. Now I'm going to add a little fin. What I'm going to do is I just took a pinch of clay and I'm going to roll it between my fingers till I create a tiny coil. And so it's pretty big. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use my needle tool to just cut some excess off. And then I'll shape it with my fingers. And I think I like that shape for the little fin. I'll make the back side a little shorter, front a little taller. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add it right here. Almost like a mohawk, but it's just a little fin, and then I'll add a little fin on the body of the fishy. So I've now done that. I'm going to score this side. The smaller pieces, it's hard to score like this on them. You can use your needle tool, it's a little easier, and you can use like a cross-hatching technique, which is almost like the numerical sign. So just so you can see it, since I did it on such a small piece, cross-hatching is where you create different lines going different directions. And what ends up happening is you create almost a texture like we're doing with this little scoring tool, the little thing that looks like a rake. So did I add the water? Yeah, I did. Okay. So now I'm gonna just attach my little fin here. And then, since my fingers are a little too big to get in there, I'm just gonna try and refine its shape with my needle tool. And you know what? I have this turntable that I'm going to use right now, just so I can spin my piece of clay easier. So this is a turntable. What happens is it makes it easier to move your piece of clay around. So I'm using that just while I move it. To clean those little lines up. I've created my little fishy, added his fin. I'm gonna wet that just a bit so I can add some lines and get rid of those tiny cracks. Smooth it out. Now I'm going to just add some detail to it. Boop. I feel like adding some little lines to his tail fin. And then I'm just going to add the tiniest little piece of clay to create a little fin here on the side of the fish. So I just pinched a little piece of clay and now I'm using my fingers to shape it. It's almost like a teardrop shape. And I'm just going to add it there, okay? I don't like that the edge isn't so crispy. Attaching that. I'm just gonna do tiny score lines here. Doot, doot, doot. You can't quite see it, but that's okay, because what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to go around the pieces that I've stuck on, and I'm just going to trace alongside of them to give them a little more dimension and make them pop. And since these are areas I've done slipping and scoring in, what's happening, what I keep rubbing on my fingers, is the excess gooey clay from what I'm drawing. It accumulates on the tip of the needle tool. And if we were to continue drawing with it on there, it would just make clumps of clay all over. So I just keep wiping it off on my hand and rolling off the excess. I'm just gonna make the eye more pronounced. And the smile a little more pronounced. And now the last few things I'm going to add are going to be the little bubbles. So I drew 3 different sizes. So the first one's going to be a relatively small ball, making that in the tips of my fingers. I'm gonna score all 3 dots so that they're ready for when I stick these on. Scoring the back of the balls I'm creating. I'll get the water for the slip on all of them. And this would not require much water because they're really small. I just want to get them a little wet. And just push that little bubble in there. Making my second one. This one's going to be a bit bigger than the last one, a bit smaller than the first one. Got clay on my fingers. Good size. Now I'm just gonna clean that excess clay up with my paintbrush. It's pretty gooey in there because it's such a small piece. So I'm just getting rid of the extra goo. I'm rolling a really, really thin coil to apply to the little water lines I wanted to have. And I think this coil that I made is big enough for both, so I'm just gonna smush down the edge and then shape it how I would want, right? So there's one, I'm gonna attach it here. tricky part is scoring this. So it's almost like I'm getting it straight again. Scoring, I'm gonna add a little bit of water to this piece here. And then once it's in place, I can shape it as I'd like. I'm actually gonna use the back of this tool here because it's got a nice round shape in it to create some tension and give me a little something to push off of. And then for these ones, I'm not gonna trace around the edge just because they're little accent pieces to show some definition to the water. Oh wait, I already made the other one. Silly me. Okay, I'm gonna score here. I'm gonna do the same. And I'm just gonna use my brush one last time to clean that space up. And now the last thing I'm going to do is create almost like a, you know how on the back of a picture frame there's a little stand that holds up a photo? We're gonna create a stand so that your piece will be able to stand on whatever surface you'd like and make it decorative. I'm also going to use a sponge to just lightly clean up the edges of my piece because it is a bit rough. So I'm just dipping a little sponge, any type of sponge would work, in the little bowl of water I have. It's not too wet. We don't want it to be too wet because when your clay is too wet, it can cause it to collapse. I'm just going over anywhere that looks a little rough, patting down that corner. And any lines that got wiped away while I was doing this, I'm just gonna go over them again with the needle tool. But like I said, I'm just lightly going over these. I'm not pushing too hard because we don't want to ruin what we just made. Oops, I created a new line there, so let's just get rid of that old one. Yeah, I'm just gonna touch up the little seaweeds. And then we'll add the little kickstand to the back. So this is what our project looks like right now. I'm going to use this extra clay. So I'm gonna scoot this back. I'm going to use this extra clay to create a triangle shape. This is larger than I need it to be, but it has to also be able to support the whole piece, so I trimmed it down a little. And what we're gonna do is we're going to score this to the back so that your finished project will be like this, okay? So the way we're going to do that is we're going to lightly hold this in our hand. we're going to use our scoring tool here. I'm going to do this straight down the center. Now that I've added my lines here, I'm going to score on this little piece. I'm going to place this back down. I've now added my lines. I've got some water. I'm going to get this wet. Score it again to get that slip. Nice gooey slip. I'm going to pick this piece up again. And then I'm going to place this on the back of my piece. And you want this angled piece to be on this side. You don't want it to be at a 90-degree angle right here, because what will happen is it'll stand straight up, but it won't have too much of a little backside to hold it secure, so it'll knock over easily. So this just gives it a nice angle so that it can rest like this. Okay, so what I've done is I've now stuck this on here, and I'm going to use my scoring tool to go along these edges to just make sure that they're scratched and they're sticking together 100%. And oftentimes when someone attaches a piece like this, they will create what's called a reinforcement coil, which is a little worm of clay that you roll between both hands I'm going to place this down very, very gently. So it's creating a worm of clay that you're going to use to attach to the side of this, help blend it together, and make sure it's very secure and won't fall over. So I'm gonna do one, because why not? It'll make it stronger. So it's already scored on the side, so I'm just gonna score this piece into place. You don't want to apply too much pressure because you don't want your piece to get smushed on the front side. So see, I'm being very careful with what I'm doing so that I'm not ruining what I've got going on in the front. And I'm just going to blend this in all together now. I'm using these fingers to support this while I apply pressure with scoring on this side. I'm just going to smooth that out. So now it's really secure on this side, and see how this side has a little bit of a depression where you just added it. This one flows more. You can use your finger, just dip it in some water, just start smoothing that out, and see how the score lines just go away. You don't want too much water because you don't want it to be too gooey and collapse. I'm gonna use the little sponge to clear that little back bit. Just clean up my lines a bit. Now I'm gonna add the other coil to this side. I'm going to score it. This is already scored. Same technique I did on the other side. I'm switching hands so I can use finger to support it. Okay. Now I'm going to do the same, use my finger to smooth this out. I want it to look nice and also be strong. Just got a little more because my finger was a bit dry. I'm gonna use a sponge to wipe off any excess and smooth out those lines. And there you have it.